So this time there's no article, there's no video that I'm going to be reviewing. This is just my thoughts, especially in light of recent mandates that were blocked by the Supreme Court. I want to discuss conservatism. You see, conservatism is an ideology that is largely rooted in a lack of critical thinking skills, rather than challenging your own confirmation biases and thinking critically about the sources that you get your information from and why you hold the positions that you do. Conservative beliefs are largely derived from common sense, which basically just means intuitive reasoning, which is inherently flawed. And often, this means that the positions that they hold are not rooted in reality whatsoever. They find evidence that supports the beliefs that they already hold and cling to that instead. I want to talk about a specific example, something that just happened in my own personal life, and then I want to get into the meat of the greater issue. So, where I work, I have a lot of conservative coworkers. One of them is openly anti-vax. They decided to discuss this in the break room in front of all of the other employees that were also on break, myself included. And I mentioned to this person that I was autistic, and having experience with anti-vaxxers over the past however many years, it's not just COVID-19, anti-vaxxers have existed for a long time, that I cannot have a conversation with someone who believes that they would rather have a dead child over an autistic one. To which he questioned whether I was actually autistic because I seemed high functioning. Now, some of you may already know this, but using functioning labels to invalidate autistic people is bad. But I moved past that because I care about people dying from a global pandemic. I then tried to convince him that vaccines were effective. He claimed that they didn't stop the spread. People who are vaccinated can absolutely still spread the virus. However, I tried to explain to him that people who are vaccinated are 17 times less likely to be hospitalized or die, even when it comes to new mutations like Delta and Omicron. He told me that my statistics were entirely bunk because you can't trust the government. He then went on to tell me that if everyone just took care of their immune systems, they would never get sick. I had to explain to him how immune systems work. He told me that vaccines contain harmful chemicals, like mercury. Now, I'm familiar with this conspiracy theory, but I'm going to read this off just to explain to anyone who's not familiar with this. Thimerosal, I might be butchering that word, but I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, is a mercury-based preservative that has been used for decades in the United States in multi-dose vials, or vials containing more than one dose, of medicines and vaccines. There is no evidence of harm caused by the low doses of thimerosal in vaccines, except for minor reactions like redness and swelling at the injection site. However, in July of 1999, the Public Health Service agencies, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and vaccine manufacturers agreed that thimerosal should be reduced or eliminated in vaccines as a precautionary measure. Basically what happened is conservatives saw the word mercury and went, "Ooh, that's bad," and then fearmongered about vaccines for the next 25,000 years. A good comparison would be if conservatives looked at the nutritional value of a banana, saw the word potassium, and went, "Wait, doesn't potassium explode?" and then demand that we ban bananas. I then went on to tell my coworker that vaccines are highly effective at helping us curb viruses, like smallpox and polio, which we used vaccines to eliminate. And then, I shit you not, he went on to tell me that he knew not one, but 2 people who contracted polio from getting the COVID-19 vaccine. I told him I would love to meet with these people and speak with them personally. And then he informed me that suddenly he had no way of contacting them. So the moral of this story is, it does not matter what you have to say to a conservative. Their ideology is entirely derived from intuitive reasoning and anecdotes. And they have experienced everything. You will never be able to out-anecdote a conservative. They will fabricate a backstory if they have to. So, if you try to convince a conservative using an anecdote, you will never win. And if you instead try to convince them using statistical analysis, they will claim that it is either academic brainwashing or a deep state conspiracy. And that's to say, if you even get to have a conversation with them, because every step of the way I tried to have this conversation with my coworker, I was reminded that he had a right to his own opinion, every time I disagreed with him. So obviously, no one is arguing the right for an individual to hold their opinions. But when you're comparing the merit of 2 different opinions, especially when they're diametrically opposed to one another, one of them is going to be more substantive. And that's what most people are attempting to do when they have conversations with conservatives. But if they remind you every step of the way, I have a right to this opinion, it is an attempt by them to avoid taking on the responsibility or consequences for holding that position. So without consequences for them holding these positions, they will never change their minds. And this is what I mean when I say conservatism is rooted in the active rejection of critical thought. If you can't use any means to change their minds, be it anecdotal or expert testimony or statistical analysis, and even if it's made blatantly clear that their position has no merit, they will still insist on holding that position and remind you that they have a right to it. So how do we move past conservatism constantly obstructing us from making any meaningful change? Well, we have to ensure that there are consequences for holding those positions, which is what they don't want. For example, conservatives often emphasize the importance of family, specifically blood-related family. Now, obviously, family doesn't have to be blood-related. It can be chosen family. Obviously, you want there to be some overlap between the family you're born with and the family that you choose to keep. But if that's not possible, that's really not your problem. Especially as a queer person, I can attest that for a lot of people in the queer community, having unsupportive families, chosen family is all they really have. And that's not because queer people are a threat to the nuclear family, it's because the nuclear family is a threat to queer people. If your family is a threat to you or your safety as a queer person, that is not your responsibility as a queer person to stay in contact with your blood-related family. And by insisting that there is a certain sanctity to family, conservatives ensure that regardless of the positions that they hold or the biases they have against certain marginalized groups, they will never experience consequences for being bigots. But if the family that conservatives claim to be so important to them is lost because they insist on holding positions that are actively dangerous and harmful, they will be encouraged to think critically about holding those positions. Conservatives also defend authoritarian power structures like capitalism, like fascism, and they will denounce democracy as a failed system. But the irony in that is that conservatives would be the ones to bring democracy to a screeching halt. Essentially, their ideology is democracy will never work because I will make sure that it won't. But if we make processes more democratic, especially in the United States, conservatives will only be disempowered because the way that they secure power is through having booster seats. They need to be given unfair advantages in order to secure power. That's why they're pushing voter suppression bills. That's why they gerrymander districts like what happened with Thomas Hofeller in North Carolina. And that's also why we have the Electoral College and why very few Republican presidents in recent years have won the popular vote. So if we make processes in the United States more democratic, they will be forced to think critically about the positions that they hold because they will need to hold more popular positions in order to secure political power. Or if we extend this to the workplace in the form of socialism, economic power. They also aggressively oppose the concept of abortion. And despite years of ignoring advocacy for my body, my choice, they stole the slogan to apply it to masks and vaccines. And of course, they did not move over on abortion rights. They just kept the double standard, where vaccines and masks are oppression, but forcing people to be incubators for other human beings is not. Now, obviously, you can apply body autonomy universally across the board. Abortion is a right that everyone should have access to. And obviously, no one can force you to take a vaccine. However, getting an abortion is not contagious. Obviously, if abortions were contagious, there would be restrictions on people who get abortions. But that's just the thing. Conservatives do not want to take responsibility for the decision not to get vaccinated. The responsibility is being placed squarely on the shoulders of people who did what they should do. Get vaccinated, wear masks, socially distance, and self-isolate when possible. It is on these people to take on the responsibility of keeping everyone safe for the decisions of those who choose not to wear masks, not to socially distance, and not to get vaccinated, despite the vaccine being completely safe, effective, and free. We need to impose more restrictions on conservatives who choose not to get vaccinated. I mean, not really specifically conservatives, anyone who's unvaccinated, but it is disproportionately conservatives who are unvaccinated. And it is disproportionately those who are unvaccinated who are dying from catching COVID, which then drives hospitals past their max capacity and forces them to refuse people hospital beds, which only causes more death. As far as I'm concerned, if you don't get vaccinated, you should not have access to public spaces where you could put other people at risk. Now, obviously, that would suck, but if they don't like it, They should focus on making these things accessible, because that's exactly what disabled people have to deal with on the daily. And if there's anything we learn from this pandemic, it's that people do not care about the hardships that disabled people face until it impacts them personally. So if they take issue with the way that society is structured, maybe they should think critically about the positions that they hold and the social structures that they reinforce.